I'm Kira Cleveland, and this is Human Intelligence. With my co-host, Ned Hayes, we talk about the importance of human creativity in the age of AI. Welcome to the future. Well, welcome to the Human Intelligence Podcast. We're excited today to have Nick Heller on our show. Nick is a designer, strategist, and freelance advocate. He helps entrepreneurs, businesses, and other freelancers level up their work. He leverages more than 15 years of experience across specialist roles and diverse industries to develop interdisciplinary solutions tailor-made to his clients' needs, challenges, and problems. Nick has been developing the School of Able, a community-driven platform and resource house for those venturing into freelancing or building their own creative studios. Welcome to the show, Nick.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm glad you're here. Well, you first came to our attention when you posted on LinkedIn about the fact that people who were anti AI are not being inept or short sighted or antiquated dolts. Can you tell me a little bit about that quote?
Yeah, I'll just start by saying the adult thing maybe is buried somewhere deep inside, and I'm still working through that. But the sentiment remains. And I think the point of that post, man, I think it was 2 or 3 in the morning, and I was at the end of a long, long work day, as you can tend to be when you're building things. I'm sure you both know those kind of hours from time to time. But I think this is an experience that resonates with people. LinkedIn, in particular, in the last couple of months, maybe even the last 6 months, has really become this place where, much like other topics in the world, it's a very binary, draw a line in the sand type environment at the moment, specifically about AI and AI adoption. And so that post was just sort of you know, it was kind of a culmination of a lot of conversations and a lot of thought and a lot of my experience, and then talking to other creatives about their feelings. And I just wanted to kind of sound off and just share what I was feeling and what I was thinking. And I think what felt right in that moment, what I hope resonated, was that the conversation often feels like if you don't adopt it now, you must be slow, or you don't understand how to make progress, or you're going to get left behind. And
Right.
I think, I want to say this too. I have a unique position where I'm self-employed. I'm my own boss. And so if I say something I don't like, it's up to me to course correct. And I know that I've had lots of conversations with people who don't have the opportunity to say maybe how they feel. And so quite a bit of that was about sharing a collective experience. And I think a lot of people feel like, hey, I'm fully capable. I'm an adult. I understand technology. In fact, I'm using my critical thinking here to say, I'm not sure this is a great idea. And so it's not that I'm interested in being left behind. I don't appreciate being called a Luddite, all the different ways
Mm.
that that's framed. I'm just saying we need to have a more substantial set of dialogues and disagreements about what this thing is, because it could be world changing. And
Mhm.
there are people who are not early adopters who want to see things from a strategic lens that need more time and context. And I'm definitely one of those people.
Well, so you just mentioned what this thing is. And I think you also went on to say that we aren't anti AI, we're just anti what this version of the thing is. So, what is this version of the thing? What are we dealing with in terms of AI? And why are we lining up to be anti this thing?
Yeah. So I think specifically when we talk about LinkedIn again, and maybe you guys have different experiences. My experience has been that we have this sort of monolithic understanding of AI as what is more appropriately called generative AI. And people are familiar with tools like ChatGPT or Claude or Midjourney, or going way back to the beginning, something like DALL-E, which is a precursor, one of the things I first started kind of dabbling in. So when I say this thing, what I'm specifically talking about is people's experience of less than a year ago not having a piece of software write every email for them, to this version of, I type in a few words and I get a thing out the other side. I think in maybe more the tongue in cheek way of saying that is like, this thing to me is more of a digital Plinko board where you just kind of put something at the top and see what you get at the bottom, and then you put it out in the world. So for me, I'm talking specifically about generative AI tools in that context, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does make sense. And oddly enough, I spent a few years in the machine learning and large language model trenches. And so I'm very familiar, like you, with how these systems are built. I almost portray myself as I'm kind of against the way that Sam Altman and Elon Musk have brought this to market. It's not even the technology itself, it's how it's being positioned and it's how it's being sold to us. You started to put your finger on some of it, but maybe there's more in kind of the business tactics that I'm against.
Yeah, so I think it's important too that I say I come from this as a creative professional. A lot of my life is being an artist and being a creative director. And so when I say I'm an advocate for freelancers, I'm usually talking about people in design fields. We have lots of conversations, have our whole careers around how to strategically place, especially in the branding side, right? How to strategically place everything from a logo to colors to the messaging and the words that are used. And so I agree with you. I think what's happening is maybe this is a good time to just say this thing. I was having a conversation the other day and I talked about the idea that the way this is being presented to people is that it's a magic box. And you watch a magic trick happen and you are just there's mystery and wonder around this thing you don't understand. But as soon as you see behind the curtain or you understand how a magic trick happens, you realize it's actually not that impressive. And so I
Mhm.
think what we're getting is a well-polished, well-marketed magic box, which is, hey, average person who doesn't know how to draw or isn't an elegant writer, this can do something closer to subjective work that's a lot harder to hold up to an objective rubric and say, is this good or bad? So if we can focus on imagery and prose and those kind of things, I think they tried to then shoehorn that into business environments. And I think that's why we're seeing a lot of the issues in business environments is because I don't think they have a really solid plan for that. So I think the larger issue isn't necessarily that AI is a bad thing. I worked in healthcare previously, and one of the things that we were looking at is how do we frame our data set, our customers' private health information in a meaningful way to them. If we could say, hey, collectively over 50,000 members, we found that preventative care keeps you out of the hospital for another 18 months on average. I mean, there's wonderful AI driven findings that can happen inside of a business or an industry. I think the issue becomes that we just took all of the data kind of in the world and said it's playground for the few and we'll sublet that out to people to play with. And what we have is this kind of ill thought out version of the magic box.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. And I think terming it the magic box is really hitting the nail on the head because it does allude to people not understanding it, right? So it's this beautiful, shiny thing. You pointed to some of the ways that AI actually can be good in the world. And from your perspective, what are ways that AI could be continued to refocus, let's say, and should add good to the world or can add good to the world?
Yeah. So one that's very near and dear to my heart is creatives in general are not the most programmatic individuals. We kind of live in wonder and invention and space, in general. So one of the
Mm.
more common themes, one of the things that our clients wished we did better was better communication and better system, right? And so there's even in our world, I would love to see a delineation between even with generative AI. I would love to see a delineation between I use this to get creative ideas and I use this to templatize my creative brief process, or I use this to build an incredible discovery session with my client. And so I'm taking a little bit of the mental load off of the systemizing that I'm bad at. Instead of I'm using this to create storyboards, or I'm using
Mm.
this because I
Yeah.
don't know what to do for an ad campaign. So I'll just kind of co-opt other people's previous ideas and remix it and call that my own. I think that's where it gets really dangerous in my world. I think another really great example goes back to businesses being able to better serve their customers. And I don't think that's through agentic AI right now. Not that I know a ton about it, but from a
Yeah.
data standpoint, businesses are really, we love data, but nobody really knows how to actually analyze it well in a meaningful way and turn it into a good customer experience. We just have more data. And so if we could, whatever the business model was, if we could just find a way to say this takes 10 hours of analysis and turns it into 5 minutes, and we're going to keep that extra 9 hours plus to really understand more of the anthropology of the data and how it relates to our customer, I think there's huge benefits. Obviously with the caveat of security and whose data
Yeah.
belongs to who, right?
Yeah. Great points.
So, our team here at Human Intelligence, and you and many other people, as you've said, we're well versed in AI. We're well versed in how it could help. I'm just curious if we could reinvent the world together, what would it look like to use AI for good and not use it to just craft crappy emails, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people have kind of jokingly said a version of this. I think we all wish we had a maid. I think we wish somebody that did the yard work instead of did the work we love to do. You know, I love yard work sometimes, but I think there is a world where if I had to pick one thing I think AI would be really helpful with, I think it's really about finding ways to help people be better communicators. I think that's a joint effort. I think that really comes down to the person desiring to be a better communicator. I don't think AI does that for you. But I think we're in the age of information where I actually think AI could lend itself to a rather hot take that I have. Everyone listening, this is not a human intelligence take. This is my take. I think we need more gatekeeping in expertise again.
Mm.
I think we have democratized information to a point that everyone takes opinion as truth. When I think about it in a silly, sort of still meaningful way, I remember old RSS feeds where it was I'd sit down at my desk and it was like reading the newspaper with my coffee. I could get through 30 snippets of news and I could at least be well informed going into my workday. But those were coming from trusted sources in a time where we really didn't have to figure out if they were trusted sources or not. I think there is a lot of our world that if we could streamline and make it more efficient, it isn't in our email inboxes. It's more around the things that give us the time and space to be better communicators and better with each other.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I'm like, I'm gonna sit with that today. I'm gonna think more on that. Appreciate you sharing it. You've also written about the copyright battles happening in,
Mhm.
nearly every creative industry. Let's start with the basics. Why does copyright matter? And why does it matter to you?
I know this isn't super helpful, but I think it's poignant. I always respond to the first question with if, copyright is really the mechanism by which we safeguard and protect ideas, right? It's about intellectual property. And when people say, well, as a lot of kind of the technologists have said, like IP law is kind of, it's moot. We don't really need that. And yet every time they go to battle about their IP, right? So
Yeah.
what I say that isn't very helpful, but I think is poignant is if ideas were not very valuable, then why do we co-opt other people's ideas so much? Like if you could just go pick them from the front yard, why do we create these tools to take other people's ideas in the first place? So I think copyright law is really valuable because though it's not done well and it's incredibly hard to regulate, it is a fair mechanism for which someone could say, hey, that thing belongs to me and I'm going to fight for it. It's not a he said, she said. There's a reason we have things like trademarks and registrations and patents. Those things exist in the law just like a speed limit does, because those are for the common good of people. And they give us mechanisms by which we can have discussions around these things we might disagree about, in this case, about ideas. I think further than that, we're seeing a world where there's so much information coming so fast that the opportunists are just funneling it and worrying about it later. And I think what's happening with Anthropic right now is the perfect example of that, which is I'm very frustrated that they're going to settle because all that is that's just a line item. That's a cost of doing business, $1.5 billion. They knew that this was
Yeah.
coming. This is not, it's a slap on the wrist, and they're going to keep making all of that money. But again, like in the core of that is the truth that copyright law worked like it needed to, right? That there was a court case and they said, that is not yours, that is ours. And the court agreed that they were correct. And so it's good to have that, even if we don't necessarily like the outcome. So,
Yes. So a different outcome could have been that the authors actually went all the way through the process and bankrupted Anthropic, right? Because that's really what it would have taken if every book was
yeah,
compensated $100,000 and they have what, like a million books in there? There you are. There's Anthropic's market cap. Well, I guess they're in a public company yet, but it is equivalent to what the company is worth. And so, to your point, they were able to get a tiny payout and just write it off. Cost of doing
Mhm.
business. I stole some stuff, so I'm just going to pay the guy a few pennies and call it good rather than actually giving the full value of the work. Correct?
Yeah, I agree with that completely. I mean, I can't remember who said it, but we've heard in testimony from these companies, from the defendants, look, hey, if we actually had to pay for the things we stole, we wouldn't be in business. So they've
Yeah.
admitted this math problem doesn't work. And the only way this works is, I have lots of other thoughts about how the legal system works in America. One of which is that, this is really just a bailout. Like this ultimately is the administration presenting AI as this wonderful thing while they're stealing from people is just a transfer of wealth. And I think the issue with the American legal system is that, Ned, you're right. If they had, I don't know, found the funds to go against the billions of dollars in investment that the legal team from Anthropic had, they probably would have won in the end. But a lot like every other court case, and this is a reason I advise often to creatives. I've had my work stolen. I could spend all the time and energy and all the legal bills to be proven right, or I could move on with my life and learn a good lesson. And
Mhm.
I think in what we're saying here too is a lesson for creators that the world that was built, the platforms that were built to share our work, maybe are not as safe as we had hoped they were. And so, what
Mhm.
does a new future look like, and how do we do that in a meaningful way where we still have access to share what we create with other people?
Absolutely. We're in such alignment and agreement here. We're part of kind of that new future, how we see things. And from what I understand is that you seem to have a pretty deep understanding of the idea of what we're doing here at Human Intelligence
Mhm.
Institute as far as accurately labeling and certifying genuine human work and human creators. I'd love to hear your perspective on what we're doing here and why you think it matters.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's crucial to the point that I was a co-founder on a startup in 2023 doing something very similar.
Oh,
I
really?
think, yeah, I mentioned that to Ned, and I can't say a ton because they have not officially launched yet, and so I've offered to kind of make a connection and let you guys chat. But what I can say is that the ethos of what we were doing was very similar to what you were doing. The way in which we were going to bring something to market maybe is a little different. But the reality is that, kind of segueing from what I just said about finding a new way for us to share what we
Mhm.
do, is that there always has been, and there will continue to be great value on human made works, right? A Honda Civic is not as expensive as an Aston Martin. And that's because those are built by hand and every inch is looked over with human eyes. And we place great value not only on objects, but we place them on things that come with intention. And so we
Mhm.
understand that it's no different than the issues people are finding with AI chat bots, is that people can very clearly see that there is not intentionality, there's not care behind the thinly veiled shroud of this. We're pretending this is a person. And so I think when it comes to works, I think of fine arts especially. Fine arts are this beautiful part of the lived human experience where people are sharing their lived experience, their perspective through their choreography or through their paintings or through their installations or the written word. And so I think as AI tries to get closer and closer to and to mimic that, we can feel that uncanny valley lack of intention. But in
Mm.
a world where we're hit 30, 40,000 times a day with a piece of content, we need systems, we need levers that tell us or flag for us, hey, this is real. I think the counterpoint that I've heard a few times is, well, if you can't tell, then AI must be good. And I think that the false equivalence there is, it's not, I don't have the speed that AI has. That is something that AI does incredibly well. It's faster than humans are. But if I sit down with something, if I have two things to look at, and one was made by Ned and one was made by somebody replicating what Ned makes, it wouldn't take me long to understand which one was Ned's.
Mm.
The problem is we're moving so fast and there's so many layers to that in our lives that things like the mark that you've created with the H is incredibly helpful because it's not pervasive to our life, but it gives us an indicator. In the same way, I think the company that I was part founder in a couple of years ago, what they're trying to accomplish is very similar. They're trying to create a signifier that says, hey, this not only was this created by a human, but we verified that, and so are all of these different platforms. So I think it's crucial moving forward because context is everything in decision making. And so when we look, I think one of the scariest things we're seeing are these deep fakes coming out of politics. I think
Mm.
when it comes to civic duty as an individual, I still have a job, you have a job, we have kids and families. I don't have hours to pour over, is this real or not real? But if something that I
Yeah.
trusted, if a trusted source could say, no, this is real, these are the words from this individual, it gives me a streamlined experience where I don't have to second guess everything. And I think we're getting to a place where second guessing everything is just going to drive us collectively insane. And I think
Yeah.
it's going to get really dark before it gets really, really better. So I think what you guys are doing is just crucial to fighting that good fight.
Really appreciate your perspective. And as far as that going insane, like I'm already starting to feel it myself. I know other people are too. So
I mean, I
definitely ready
brought
for sleep.
plants inside my house. I'm going crazy. So
Yeah. There you go. There you go. One thing that I really appreciate you and your work and how you position yourself in the world is your commitment to other people winning, right? One thing that you said was like you're most interested in helping with other creative professionals because when they win, you win, right? It
mhm.
doesn't always have to be about competition, and that community commitment is really beautiful. How did that, are there other ways that you express that, or what's the time that that really stood out to you?
Yeah, I think for me, I'm finally at the point in my career where I'm just being honored and blessed by the opportunities where younger creatives are coming and asking me questions. And it's an opportunity for me to learn from them. It's also an opportunity to realize that the world is bigger than what my needs are, and that I deeply believe that the career I've made doesn't belong to me. It belongs to the industry and it belongs to people who are like-minded. And so I had some really incredible mentors as I was learning how to be a business person and a better artist on behalf of clients. And so I'm moving into a space where I've shut down my creative agency, and I'm moving into a space where I'm becoming more of a resource house and trying to demystify a lot of the kind of scary parts of starting up a business and dealing with customers. It's a thing I've always believed in. I think one of my favorite parts about what I do is the education and empowerment aspect of it. And so whether it was I'm talking to a client about creative that we have to make for them and helping them understand why it's valuable, or giving people context so they make better decisions for themselves. I think the power of education and the power of learning is what helped me get where I am, and it's what will help other people get to where they want to go. So
The way that you're reframing it, it's looking at the creative economy as an economy of collaboration versus just an
yes,
economy of competition. And I just
yeah,
think that's amazing.
yeah. I mean, everybody's against us already. You know, art is hard. Like design is hard. It's subjective in nature, and so I don't expect a business owner to really get it. It's not ones and zeros. It's not a P&L statement. It is like the hardest part about what we do is we take people's ideas and dreams and we problem solve them into reality in a way that serves a business that needs to continue to make profit. It is not an easy thing. It is not about taste. It's about empathy and understanding people. And I
Mhm.
think really at the core of being creative, like one of the things that I've been reflecting on lately, and I think is true, whatever you feel about a higher power or don't, you as a human can understand that you were created. And so as a result, you reflect and absorb creation in other ways, right? So there's a reference always to this is bigger than me because I understand where I came from. And so I think when you talk about that in a professional standpoint, the only way ahead is collaboration. The only way ahead is abundance, not scarcity. And I think our competition should be with ourselves, and it should be with getting the best rates that we can get from our clients while giving them high quality effort and work. I don't love that we're in this position where you and I could chat about what we do the same work and neither of us knows what each other makes. I only simply because that doesn't help you or me get any better at anything. It helps other people negotiate us down in price. And so that is a microcosm of the whole, which is none of this should be kind of kept to ourselves. This should be shared. the human experience is better for it. I think if we can stop focusing on trying to hold each other down and we can start working on refining the best ideas together, everybody wins. I just believe that very much.
I can see it in so much of what you do. Your current project is Able Concepts. You bill your company as bringing together artists and creatives from all walks of life to develop a multidisciplinary powerhouse of ideas, inventions, and implementations. Tell us more about what you're doing there.
Yeah, so I'm still kind of sorting out how to make sense of it. I'm launching kind of a micro, very niche consulting service called the Brand Friendly early on that will fit under the bill of Able Concepts, and the Brand Friendly is looking specifically at the hard costs associated with creative asset licensing. So when you think about fonts and stock photography and imagery, a lot of business owners are not properly licensed there. That's kind of adjacent to our copyright discussion. They also don't have full ownership over their brand because they're leasing assets from other people, right? So there's this opportunity to help people, again, through education and empowerment, say, this is really, when you use that font, when you use these photos, these other people are in bed with you and you can't make decisions on your own, and it's going to cost you a lot of money. And that idea helps me then leverage opportunity for the creative freelance community, which I think then builds on the idea that, I think what's so challenging about remote work is that while we can collaborate like this digitally, it is challenging to continue to be in the work with people. And I think when it comes to creative professions, if you're an app developer, if you're an illustrator, if you're in marketing, collaboration happens in real time and real space. And so my goal is to create both digital and analog experiences of creative with other freelancers who are trying to do that as well. And I think once we get to a certain mass, we have the opportunity to be rather influential. And I think if we can all standardize an experience of what's acceptable, what is high quality care for a customer, how do you best provide work? What does work look like? And I think getting in lockstep with other creatives, where it is about let's support each other, let's refer to each other, let's bring each other into projects. I've seen it work time and time again. And so I just want to get to a place where the 21-year-old coming out of school has an opportunity to learn, but the 40-something like me also has an opportunity to, invest into that thing as well. So on the back heels of the Brand Friendly, ideally will be the School of Able, which will be that resource. I'm going to kind of model it after a university with undergrad and kind of major specific coursework through some different creative disciplines. And then on the back heels of that will be Studio Able, which will be more like lab or residency type opportunities with brands and grant type work and those sort of things in communities. So it's a huge idea. I shut down the first half of my career, and I kind of see this as the thing for the next 15 to 20 years if it goes well. So
fantastic. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Nick. This has been a really great conversation. Would love to continue at some later time.
Yeah, thank you, Ned. Thank you, Kira. You guys have been great.
You can find out more about any of these news items and hear the complete interview on the extended premium version of our podcast at humanintelligence.news. Today's episode was produced by Ned Hayes and engineered by Muhammad Adnan. Our analog-only human-themed music was created for the Human Intelligence podcast by Josh Pinkston of Nature and Spirit. This episode, and every episode, is brought to you by the Human Intelligence Institute team. That's all for Human Intelligence. Thanks for listening to today's episode. As always, this episode is available online at humanintelligence.news.